So my name is Bourgerie. I'm the Director of Colorado Peace Officer Standards and Training. Before I came to Post, and I've been here for 7 years, which is unusually long for a Colorado Post Director. Um, Before coming to Post, I worked for a smaller, more rural sheriff's office in Colorado for 20 years, where I retired as a division commander. So I'm also the first vice president for IADLIST, which is an international association for post directors. This is my second go around on the executive committee. Um, Not every state has a post, although almost every state has a post-like organization or an organization that fulfills the same functions as post. As far as Colorado Post is concerned, we are part of the AG's office. We do have a board of 24 people, quite large board. Most of those positions are appointed by the governor, with our attorney general being the statutory chair of the board. We are responsible for all law enforcement certifications in the state. As part of that, we oversee all 34 law enforcement training academies to make sure that they are meeting the requirements set by the board. We issue training grants to law enforcement agencies. We create and deliver training for law enforcement, and we also revoke peace officer certifications for statutorily defined transgressions. So we are here to discuss our credibility disclosure notifications in Colorado that came about due to legislation in 2021 officially. But I do want to make one point briefly about untruthfulness in general in Colorado. So when we talk about untruthfulness, I describe it as a triangle, with the base of that triangle being Brady Giglio lists, which are maintained by our district attorney's offices, and it is at the district attorney's discretion on who is placed onto the Brady Giglio lists. Just above Brady would be our credibility disclosure notifications. So it is a smaller set of standards defined in statute that would qualify a peace officer for being enclosed on or put on the credibility disclosure notification. And then at the very tippy top of that pyramid, the very smallest part, is revocation for untruthfulness. So one of the things that we can revoke for is untruthfulness, but it's a very high standard, very narrow set of circumstances of when that untruthfulness occur that results in an action against their certification. So just to kind of give you the global perspective of Colorado's system when it comes to peace officer untruthfulness. This all started in 2020 with Senate Bill 2217, the Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Act. This was a post-George Floyd law enforcement reform bill. And that legislation created the Peace Officer Database, which can be found in Colorado Revised Statute, Title 24, Article 31, Part 303. This bill moved very, very quickly. With COVID, they had suspended the legislative session and then brought it back for a couple of weeks, I believe in June. And this bill was immediately introduced and it passed very, very quickly. So you can imagine the process this went through, because it covered a lot of different areas. Then in 2021, House Bill 211250 was introduced. And this was kind of a cleanup bill for Senate Bill 2217. It made some modifications to what was passed in 217, and it added some new requirements. And including that, it added a lot of requirements to the peace officer database. A companion bill was running at the same time, Senate Bill 21174. And this it originally started as the idea of a statewide Brady Giglio type list. Was the initial thought behind 174. And it did provide some due process concerning being placed on a Brady Giglio list, which Colorado doesn't necessarily have. As the bill progressed, it got assigned to Title 16, Article 2.5, Part 502 in Colorado Revised Statutes. And it really lays out what we know today as credibility disclosure notifications. Part of this bill defined peace officers to include employees who perform a law enforcement function. So not all peace officers in Colorado or statutory peace officers in Colorado are required to have post certification. Like detention deputies or DA investigators are not required to be post certified. But they also wanted to make sure that they incorporated, say, evidence techs or crime scene investigators into these credibility disclosure notifications. The legislation created a credibility disclosure notification, which was led by the Colorado District Attorney's Council and an organization that represents peace officers. And they were tasked with creating a model policy for the state. Law enforcement agencies and district attorneys' offices were required to create policies that complied with the model policy. And so really the model policy has become the guiding factor for us in the credibility disclosure realm. A last minute addition to 174 required post peace officer database to be public facing. That wasn't a requirement in 217 or in 1250, but 174 did require that our database be viewable by the public. So the model policy outlines how a peace officer gets onto the database. The first part of that was that the peace officer had to knowingly make an untruthful statement concerning a material fact, that the peace officer demonstrated a pattern of bias based on religion or race, religion, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and so on, tampered with or fabricated evidence, been convicted of any crime involving dishonesty or has been charged with any felony or any crime involving dishonesty, and violated any policy of the law enforcement agency regarding dishonesty. So agencies are required to do an investigation on these matters. If it's sustained, they're required to forward that to the DA's office. Also, under these requirements, if the peace officer is under criminal or administrative investigation that would require disclosure, they would also have to report that investigation to the district attorney's office if these circumstances are met. If the peace officer is a potential witness in a pending criminal prosecution, and if the investigation involves an allegation related to the peace officer's involvement in the defendant's pending case. So if they're the arresting officer, and the suspect, the criminal defendant has been formally charged, and they're under investigation for any of those 5 criteria, the law enforcement agency has to report that to the district attorney's office. So on implementation, there's some challenges on this. One, we didn't receive any funding for the peace officer database, so we had to, and we are statutorily prohibited from receiving general fund dollars. We have a cash fund through our vehicle registration system, so we have a finite budget that the legislature can't easily add to. So we had to figure out how to do all this through our existing budget and existing staffing. So we created a Salesforce receptacle for the peace officer database that is accessible through our post website. But we had one way for law enforcement agencies to report to us, because they are in our records management system, or they can access our records management system, and they can report their things on the database to us through that. DA's offices don't have that same access. And we didn't have a way really to get them into our system, at least to do this type of reporting. So we created a link into the Salesforce site that we get, that myself, my deputy director, and our investigator get an email on, and in fact, I just got one during the course of this presentation, reporting a credibility disclosure notification. We get that, and then our investigator does a little bit of work to the report, and then we publish it immediately to our database, our public-facing database. We had to do a lot of education on the database. Who needs to be reported, when it needs to be reported, how do you get people off the database? Has been a large topic of discussion. What constitutes being able to be removed from the database, not just for the credibility disclosure notification, but also for our other items that are on the peace officer database. Media interest really took us by surprise on this. We will post an entry onto the database, and we will have a media inquiry within an hour of that posting. And so we just have to expect that. Now, we only receive just the information, just that there's a credibility disclosure notification for a violation of policy on dishonesty. And that is all that we receive as post. We don't want any of the underlying documents. But the media always wants those from us, and we are constantly turning them back to the agencies involved for that information, because frankly, we don't have it. Another item that has popped up is who has the authority to remove database entries, specifically for credibility disclosure notifications. Is it post, or is it the DA's office? The statute contemplates the DA's offices having to adopt a policy for removal. The model policy says that there needs to be, or there's the ability for the DA's offices to remove. But there's also statute on the peace officer database, largely, where post removes it. And so we are asking for a legislative fix to clarify who can remove those database entries at this point, so that we have a solid understanding statewide as to who has a responsibility to remove those items.